Hello everyone, welcome back to Naomi's Bookshelf. Today we're going to do my review of Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. So in this review, I'm going to be doing spoiler-free section first and then spoilers, as I normally do with these big classics that I read. I definitely have some thoughts on this one, and I am very, I hate to say it, but nervous to film this and put my thoughts out there to the world, because I feel like this book is very well loved and very appropriately so in some ways, and then other ways I have some opinions, and I got some a little bit of hate on my other video where I vlogged my immediate reactions to this book. So I am a little nervous, but I am not going to take away from my experience of reading this book and give my full review. So Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell was written in 1936, and it's about the Civil War, and it starts just before the Civil War is starting. It's like the afternoon before it's declared, or maybe 2 days before the afternoon is declared, and then it goes into post-Civil War. So it follows over the entire time. It's quite a saga. If you've never read it or watched the movie, there's a reason why it's so long. It's quite a saga drama kind of thing, and it has a lot of depth. It is definitely about some unlikable people who are people you aren't supposed to enjoy. Well, the main character we obviously hear this book through is Scarlett O'Hara, and she is not, it's not first person, but it's like all through her perspective. So it's very interesting. She is the worst brat you could probably ever read about, and Margaret Mitchell tells us that, like, from the beginning. She's not going to be a good person. We also meet lots of men in Scarlett's life, as she likes to manipulate men. We find that out literally from the beginning of the book, so it's not a spoiler. And she is working her way through her life and sometimes not thinking through things and how that can affect people around her or herself directly down the road. It's a very powerful book in a lot of ways, but at the same time, I definitely have some complicated feelings about this. I'm going to give trigger warnings in this section as well, in case you have never really looked into it, because I don't like to look into classics that I've never read, because I like to be walking into them pretty blind and learning something new and not being spoiled. So this one obviously is trigger warnings for racism, no doubt, extreme slavery. I'm not going to be, I don't know, denying anyone that fact. It also has trigger warnings for a lot of murdering and a lot of different things like that around that time. And this one also has, I would say, definitely trigger warnings for things like parenting neglect and that kind of, maybe not abuse, but that kind of parenting trouble. So I'm gonna just give warnings for that. This is a book that I found that once I started reading it, I couldn't put it down. But then after a certain point, I just wanted to get it over with, which is very sad to be in that place. So I'm giving it a 3-star, and I will be going into spoilers now. But I mean, if you like spoilers for classics, stick around. And if not, I hope that you will go to the end of the video. I'm going to be pulling out a random book for my next big classic, because I can't decide on my own. So I hope you can stick around and or come back to the end where you can see what book I pick. But the Gone with the Wind book. So let's talk about things I really loved first. So first of all, I really loved how much of an in-depth look we got into the South's society and culture before Civil War. Even though it wasn't that long of a pre-Civil War era, we did get a lot of information. And I thought it was really fascinating to learn about that and how people were to behave and how they were not to behave. I really enjoyed that whole day of the scene, or like the whole day, so like one scene essentially, but where they're at the picnic and all the men are around Scarlett because she's trying to make Ashley jealous. And I just really enjoyed that. I thought it was just such an interesting look at Scarlett and how her behavior was inappropriate, while also how it showed the people around her. I thought that was an interesting look. So I really enjoyed Scarlett's portrayal, I guess. I think because we know from the get-go, and we get information from the narrator right away that Scarlet is a definite brat and that she has never been told no in her life, and if she has, she doesn't believe it, so why would she take it for real? I really like this idea of her. I will now go into Rhett Butler, because I think Rhett Butler is a really interesting character. I really enjoyed how he showed so much of what was changing in the book. So he showed a lot of the South and how perspectives were changing, but also then he showed how he was helping, but he didn't really believe in the cause. And then as he progressed throughout the book, you just kind of felt like, yeah, he's a villain, but he owns it. Like, he never proclaims that he's a good guy, whereas Scarlet will proclaim that she is not in the wrong, but she is, and you know it. So I like that Rhett Butler was like, no, I'm a rogue, I'm awful, and I own it. I was happy about that. I liked that he definitely called out Scarlet for what she did, and he never let her get away with anything. When the scene happens of the bazaar where they're all giving away gold for the cause and the war efforts, and she takes off her ring as like a freedom thing, and Melanie takes off her ring as a very big sacrifice, Rhett Butler returns Melanie's ring and not Scarlet's, because Scarlet doesn't want it back, but Melanie was so thankful. And I was like, that shows a bit of heart in Rhett Butler, but also the manipulative side, because like it said in there, he was able to get into the home and visit them because Melanie was suddenly a defender of Rhett Butler. She was never going to let anybody talk down about him, and that happened for the rest of the book. I think that it shows how he is conniving, but also he does have a heart in some ways. So I did like that, and I liked that he owned his badness, essentially. So I really liked Rhett Butler, and I really liked how Scarlet deserved him whenever he treated her poorly or gave her those low blows, and whenever he brought up the fact that she had thrown herself at Ashley and Ashley had said no, and he was like, there no witness the whole thing. Really enjoyed it. So when I had actually picked up this book, I had watched the movie years ago, probably 10 plus years now. So I didn't remember much, but I knew that Rhett Butler and Scarlet had a love-hate relationship. I didn't know they got married. I didn't know anything like that, but I didn't mind finding that out from my cousin Megan, because I was like, this is okay. I didn't know too much going in, which I was happy with. But when that scene happens where she sneaks into the library, I was like, oh, I just was dying with laughter, because I knew that Rhett was in there, even though I had never remembered that part before. And I was like, this is going to be so good. I can't wait. And I was very happy with the end result. So I had lots of really happy and wonderful feelings for the first half. Then we get back to Tara. I struggled with the second half. So the second half really came in when basically they were around a lot of people of color. And that's when the racism became really apparent and the really derogatory terms came out. I couldn't disregard those comments because they were just so awful, and I just couldn't help that. I remember a couple specific comments because I had been with Megan and we had been listening to it, and we listened to the scandalous dance scene, which was so much fun. And I will like also to say, so I'm going to go back to when I was really loving the book. Margaret Mitchell drew me into this world. She was able to tell me about things and teach me a society and a cultural aspect that I did not know. So the fact that she was wearing this black gown and she had to wear this for the rest of her life, and then the veil and how long it was and how she was a widow, I just really understood that and how severe it was. And then when my cousin was like, oh, well, they're gonna dance now. I'm like, no, they're not, because that's impossible. And then they did. I was just like, how? Megan referred to the fact that we were able to get it so quickly and so efficiently, how wrong that situation was. And then later talking to Sarah, my other cousin, I was like, it's the equivalent of her stripping naked in the street, which it was. And it was just so interesting to have that ability to get a culture that I have never read about before in this perspective. So I really loved that Margaret Mitchell put us through the society, and we were able to understand how women were supposed to behave and they were treated during this time. So I think it was really, really well written and really well put together. Even though those chapters were so long, I never minded because I was just so engrossed in how I was learning about everything. And I'm a big reader and learner at the same time. So I was very happy about that. But like I said, back at Tara, this is where my struggle came in because I had gone home after talking with Megan. We were like, they're so excited to read this book. And she really wanted to read it. And then I had to take screenshots for her because I was like, this is not, I need to rant to somebody about this statement I'm reading. And it was really hard because the way that people were treated as soon as she returned to Exeterra, it was just so different than it had been when she was in Atlanta. And the entire perspective of people was different. It was like people of color in Atlanta were the good slaves and they were the good people. But then as soon as they went back, it was like they were awful and they were, or they were the ones who stayed were the good ones and everyone else was a horrific slave. And it was just so hard to read that. And I really struggled. So I basically just pushed through, and then I found that every time a person of color was on screen, or on page, I should say, it was very difficult to read a lot of the racism and the blatant comments and the things that happened came through. And I just found it so difficult to pick up because even though I knew this book was all about that, it was just so much more than you expect going in. It was just so enriched with it. I prefer the scenes where no one was a person of color because it just made it easier to read, and that was unfortunate. I also noted that the N-word was used so much, and I understand that like it's a term in that it's like that was okay back then, or they thought it was okay. I mean, it was not okay, but the book used it 185 times. And I think the important part to remember about this book is that's a historical fiction. It is a book that is set in the Civil War, but it was written in 1936. It is not a book that was written in the 1800s. It is not that old comparatively. So it's not something to just brush off lightly. And then the other derogatory term, which is nowhere near as bad, but still is a derogatory term, was white trash. And that one was interesting because I looked at the significance of it and how that started off as people who came over from being like orphans and working on farms as indentured servants, and how that became a thing. And then this term kept coming up in the book, and I was like, why would they say this? But this term has been around for so many, like hundreds of years. And I was just shocked at what that term meant, especially in that time era. I think we don't understand that in our day and age. And I was kind of shocked, to be honest, about the actual origin of the term white trash. It was very, very sad. So I had a lot of hard times with the derogatory terms and the name calling of people. And I also had a lot of difficulty with the way that they reacted to people. And I get it. This is why I was struggling to film this video. I put it off for a little while now because I just didn't want to. But the reason I didn't like it at all is because anytime a Black man was accused of a crime, it would just be like he would just be killed. And the KKK was glorified, it was honored, and it was protected, and it was supported, and everything was just not okay. That's not a good enough way to say it, and I know it isn't, but I just can't find the words to describe the feeling I felt while reading about this. And when Scarlett discovers that her husband Frank was in the KKK, I was angry for her not because she was mad that he was in it, but she was mad that he would get caught. So it wasn't that even she's like, oh, that's a bad thing. She was the only person who did not want anyone in the KKK. And she didn't want them in there because they would get caught. That was the only reason. So this whole level of, I didn't do anything wrong, but I'm upset that I got caught, was very much like a 3-year-old who is just mad that they were seen hitting somebody. And it was just so enriched. I definitely saw the theme of changing perspectives and changing attitudes, and it was just so difficult to read with the knowledge that this book was published so much after the fact. I did appreciate that it showed a time period in history and a way that people were treated in history, because I think that's really important to keep in perspective and not lose. And I think that we need to not forget. I think we need to remember, but also take that story with a grain of salt in some ways, because so often it was about these slaves or these former slaves, these people of color who were suddenly free, and then they were suddenly treated as the worst. They were ungrateful. They should have been thankful that they were in slavery. And that's something else about this. As soon as I started reading it, I noticed instantly how slavery was treated with rose-colored glasses. Instantly, I realized that not one single slave owner was treated with a bad lens. We were to be expecting good behavior out of all of the slave owners. The Yankees, not so much. The Yankees were horrible, but the slave owners were to be expected of good behavior. They were kind to their slaves. They were considerate. They were their slaves, but they were also like, we're not going to beat our slaves. We're not going to hurt our slaves. We're going to buy an extra slave because it's her daughter. All of these things. And it was like, I saw through it right away, and I was questioning from the beginning, before I even knew much about Margaret Mitchell, about what side she stood on and what her perspective was when I had just started the book. And what I found from the back page of this book is that Margaret Mitchell found out that the Civil War was lost by the South when she was 10 years old, I think it was, maybe 12. I'll check that quickly. It says that, I'll just read it for you. So, born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, Margaret Mitchell was 10 years old before she discovered the Confederates had lost the war. The daughter of a prominent lawyer and authority on the South, Miss Mitchell was brought up with stories of Southern heroism told and retold by relatives whose stirring account of the war never included its outcome. So I could tell pretty early on that something was different about how slave owners were treated. And I was wondering at first if it was just the O'Haras and then other people would be, treated equally. Like, I'm sure, I don't want to get any hate for this, please understand. I'm sure that there were some people who treated their slaves not horribly, but they were still slave owners. And I'm never going to discount that as a good thing, okay? But I'm saying that there is a scale of cruelty, and a scale being maybe the O'Haras weren't treating their slaves like that and abusing them and constantly treating them like garbage, but maybe they were up on the good side of the scale. This is not coming out right, I'm sorry, but maybe they were treating them on the kinder side, and other people would be shown, because a scale, a balance. And that is never the case. And the other thing about this book was that Scarlett O'Hara only ever thought that the war was bad because people were losing their lives. She never thought the war was bad because of the fight that they were fighting from. And so these different perspectives were just difficult for me to wrap my head around. And I am still having difficulty wrapping my head around it. But yeah, so let's get into other things that I enjoyed, because I really did enjoy certain elements, and I want to talk about those because we've already talked enough about what I haven't enjoyed. So the things I really enjoyed, I really loved how Tara seemed like to be a steadfast piece for Scarlett O'Hara. And I think that she just loved Tara and the idea of Tara so much. And I think that's something else I really enjoyed seeing about Scarlett, was that she loved the idea of things and not the actual thing itself, or not the actual person itself being Ashley. She loved the idea of Tara until she had to work Tara. She loved the idea of Ashley until she was like, actually, I don't want to, he's not for me. And all of these things, she just was in a childlike state. She loved the idea of marrying Charlie to get back at everyone and have them all be mad at her. But then she realized after she got married that she can't have the fun of a single girl anymore. Like, she never thought through her actions. She never had the forethought. She never had the logic and the perceptions of what's going to happen because of her actions. She also was an interesting character in the way that she had her willpower. I didn't like that she had street smarts and cunning. She was able to really develop a money sense that no one else around her could. And she didn't let the men around her tell her no because she was a woman. I did appreciate that she was able to do that, but at the same time, I don't like her. Okay, when I'm saying these things I like about her, I don't like her. She's by far one of the worst people I've ever read, and I've read a few villains. She's not the worst, but she's one of the worst. She's on the top 10, I think. But it's just, she had these qualities that were really interesting to read about. When she had the convicts and she wanted to have the free labor, essentially, she didn't care as long as she had the free labor, even if they were being mistreated. She wanted them treated properly, but the only person who would work there would treat them poorly, so she didn't deal with that situation. So she clearly cares more about money over people, whether they are people of color or not. So I think that's interesting. But then I also really liked the fact that she had this, she had this way of convincing people that she was the right one every time. I think that was really interesting. And I liked that she was able to just go with what she was able to say and do, and people were able to just fall to her and believe every word that she said. I also really liked that she eventually had to suffer the consequences of not being a good mother. She had to eventually suffer the consequences of not being a good person. And I love the fact that Rhett Butler called her out on it at the end. So when she treated Wade horribly and she never cared about her son and she called him the kid or the baby or whatever, she never called him her child, I was so mad. But then when she finally wants to have a relationship with him, he doesn't want a relationship with her and she can't force it. When she also wants a relationship with her other daughter, she can't force it because she's never been a part of their lives. I also thought it was interesting how Rhett was like, I loved you for so long and you used your love, the love of people, like a whip over them, because she had done that so many times. She had said, I will, I'll use this person's love against them. Essentially, she would be like, oh, if I can get this person to love me, I can do this. If I can get Frank to marry me instead of my sister, he can pay my taxes. If I can get this person to do this, I can do that. And it was just so conniving. And then when she finally had the own fallout, it was too late. She had no choice. And I think it was also interesting that Rhett was like, yeah, you don't get me back even though I did love you and I would have done everything for you. And now you don't get me. Sorry. He just didn't care. And I think that that's a very fair thing because she just, at this point in the book, she had just been like, I think she was coming to the realization that she had done a lot of things wrong and it was too late. I think that's something else about Scarlett that I noticed a lot. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, but like she never planned ahead. She never could see into the future or the consequences of her actions. She always thought actions had no reactions. So she would think, oh, well, if I do this, nothing's going to go wrong. If you dance with Rhett Butler, people are going to be shocked and horrified, and your father will come and find you in Atlanta and try to bring you home. But if you manipulate him, your relationship with your father is twisted. Which it was. It was broken a little bit, I think. And so these different things, she never really considered that her actions caused a reaction or had a consequence down the line, especially when it came to people who she loved, and especially her children. And I'm happy that she kind of had to suffer. And I also want to acknowledge the fact that at the end of the book where it's like, I will come back home often enough that it doesn't look like we're not married. So we're not getting a divorce for your sake. But I will never love you. And we are not a married couple in actions and deeds or whatever else. And I thought that was fair. I thought that it was like, he's like, I'm going to do this because it's respectability, but I'm not going to be I'm not gonna be your puppet because now you want me. And I was like, well, I mean, that's fair. You treated him like garbage for 900 pages. What do you expect? So I thought that was an interesting twist on it too. So I really liked how all of these different people and all of these different relationships came together to meld into Scarlett's perception of the world changing at the end. And I do think that she had a really potential future. I think she has an interesting idea going forward, but I also think that people just have seen through her enough, and they just don't care. I think they just don't care anymore. I'm really happy with that. And I am excited that in some ways people are free of her now. They can see the callous, the cruelty of Scarlett in treating everyone like an object, like a pawn in her game. And now that they can see her doing that, they're free. At least Rhett's free, her children are free, and she can do, you know, respectable things, but at the same time, no one thinks of her as being respectable because she's always done things to people who don't like matter. She doesn't care about how her actions impact everything else, like dancing at the bazaar or, you know, going around town and doing social calls. She doesn't care when she is a widow, and those things are really important in that society. I also want to make one note that's totally not related to Scarlett. Although I did look this up because I was trying to figure out how exactly these two characters related. So Belle, I think was her name, the lady, the prostitute, and Scarlett are very similar in a lot of ways. And I thought it was really interesting that Belle had like the most vibrant red hair. And I was like, the one sentence that pulled out to me in the book was when she's like, that hair's not natural. So I was like, I need to find out when hair dye was invented. I need to know. So hair dye, in case you're wondering, red hair dye was invented in 1863. So that was 2 years after the Civil War had started, because the Civil War started in 61. So not accurate timing. And it was also invented in England, so not the United States. I thought that was just an interesting fact of note because I was like really curious about that and why she had this vibrant red hair, and everyone talked about it. I also really did like her character though. I thought that she had a lot of interesting points in how she was an outcast and how she still managed to try to help those around her. Obviously I don't agree with all of her political views, but I'm not going to get into that right now. It's not a big deal. But I mean, it is a big deal, but I'm not going to get into it. So I've already gotten into it. But I do think that it was interesting to see how she and Scarlett were similar in a lot of ways, and how yet Rhett Butler always went back to Belle because she was actually someone who he could have a relationship with, whereas Scarlett wanted to use him for everything she could. And I thought that was interesting. So that is kind of my thoughts on Gone with the Wind. I did, like I say, make a reaction vlog in case you're wanting to know more of my bad reactions, but I feel like I talked about a lot of them here. So I would like to now pull out my next big book because I was looking at my shelves and I couldn't figure out which one that would be. So let's pull out one. Okay, so here's the jar. It's not that many, but it's some of I made a jar a long time ago with all these. I'm going to take up this one because I've already tried Alias Grace and I'm not reading it. I'm never going to read that one. I'll probably watch the show, but either way, let's pull out my next big classic because I can't make up my mind, which is fine. All right, this one, I've already read that one. I read that one last summer. Clearly, I haven't gone through this jar in a while. Okay, and I'm going to just pull up Great Expectations right now. I have read that one. I'm doing pretty good with this jar. Okay, this one. David Copperfield. All right, I'll read David Copperfield. So I will be reading David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. I'll quickly grab that one. I somehow managed to bump this, but I'm not going to fix it for this last few seconds. So I'll be reading David Copperfield. It's really big, but I'm okay. I mean, that one was 1,000 pages. This one is 750 in this edition, 765. So I have an audiobook of this. I don't know anything really, but I know it's David Copperfield, and well, not David Copperfield, no, it's Charles Dickens, and I do enjoy his work when I pick it up. So I will be picking up an audiobook of this one. I don't know when I'll finish it, but maybe I'll give myself 2 months to listen to the audio in case I don't get to it in the rest of May. But yeah, that's my next big book. So these will be, well, this one is my new one. That's my old one. Please let me know down below if you have read Gone with the Wind, if you watched the movie, if you have a favorite character or a least favorite character. Also, if you have any thoughts about how I should approach David Copperfield via audiobook or text. I think my audiobook has, what's his name? The guy who plays Mr. Thornton in, I know his name. I have this audiobook. I'll put the picture here. Either way, I'm excited to read it. So please let me know down below your thoughts on these two. Also, if you've enjoyed this video, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. And also subscribe if you're new here, and I will talk with you next time. Bye for now.